For 3 decades, in a plain warehouse in Burbank, California, a single storage unit sat in silence. It was rented under a fake name, paid for in cash, month after month, year after year. No one ever visited. No one ever missed a payment. The man behind it? Sammy Davis Jr., one of the most famous entertainers in the world. After his death in 1990, the rent kept coming, until it didn't. When investigators finally opened the metal door, they expected to find stage costumes, maybe a few old instruments. Instead, they uncovered something far more dangerous. Letters revealing the truth about Sammy's real mother, private tapes of conversations that could destroy reputations, and evidence of what really happened with actress Kim Novak in 1958. Sammy had documented everything, and for 30 years, the most intimate pieces of his life had been locked away, hidden from the public, until now. Sammy Davis Jr.'s arrival into the world on December 8, 1925, was anything but ordinary. Born in Harlem, New York City, the beating heart of the Harlem Renaissance, he entered a neighborhood alive with jazz riffs spilling out of smoky clubs, poets reciting in crowded basements, and painters capturing the energy of a new cultural awakening. His father, Sammy Davis Sr., was already a seasoned dancer on the vaudeville circuit, known for his crisp footwork and tireless energy. His mother, Elvira Baby Sanchez, was a skilled tap dancer and showgirl of Cuban descent. But this last detail, her Cuban heritage, was deliberately hidden. In an America still rigidly divided by race and increasingly suspicious of immigrants, having a Cuban background could invite prejudice from both white and black communities. For black performers, public perception was everything. Revealing such roots could mean canceled bookings, lower record sales, and fewer film roles. And so the family crafted a carefully edited version of their history. On stage, Elvira was simply black. At home, the rhythms of Cuban music still played. Spanish words slipped naturally into conversation, and traditional dishes occasionally appeared on the dinner table. Sammy's first memories weren't of schoolyards or playgrounds, but of backstage dressing rooms where grown men adjusted cufflinks under dim light and women in sequined costumes reapplied lipstick before the curtain rose. His crib was a theater trunk. His lullabies were the muffled beats of tap shoes striking wooden boards. In the midst of Harlem's creative explosion, he was surrounded by artists who weren't just surviving, but fighting to redefine how America saw them. That fight would become part of him. Even before he could fully understand what prejudice was, Sammy was learning, from his parents, from their friends, that talent could open doors, but it could also draw fire. His family didn't just teach him to dance. They taught him to navigate a world where applause could turn to hostility in an instant. And from the very beginning, he understood that every performance was more than entertainment. It was proof. By the time most children were learning to read, Sammy Davis Jr. was learning to pack a suitcase in under 5 minutes. The road wasn't an adventure. It was home. He traveled from city to city with the Will Maston Trio, an act led by his father and uncle Will Maston, a man who treated Sammy like his own son. Together, they crisscrossed the country in buses, trains, and the occasional second-hand car, never staying in one place long enough for Sammy to make friends his own age. Instead of classrooms, his lessons came from train conductors who taught him how to tell time by the position of the sun, from old vaudeville performers who shared secrets about stage presence, and from newspaper clippings pinned to green room walls that carried the headlines of a segregated America. His handwriting was shaky, his spelling inconsistent, but his memory for choreography, comedic timing, and musical phrasing was flawless. Life on the road was not without its shadows. In towns across the South and Midwest, they were refused hotel rooms because of the color of their skin. There were nights when the trio would perform to roaring applause, only to be told to leave through the back door and sleep in the car. Sammy's world was a study in contradictions. One moment, he was a beloved entertainer. The next, a boy who couldn't sit at the same lunch counter as his audience. But constant travel sharpened him. He learned to adapt to any crowd, adjusting his performance in real time. He could make a hard-drinking club audience in Chicago roar with laughter, then charm a refined theater crowd in New York the next night. Every show was another brick in the foundation of a career that would one day defy racial and cultural boundaries. And even as a child, Sammy carried himself like a professional. By the age of 8, he wasn't just tagging along with the Will Maston trio, he was the reason people came to see them. In 1933, a 7-year-old Sammy Davis Jr. stepped in front of a movie camera for the first time. The film was Rufus Jones for President, a short musical comedy starring the legendary Ethel Waters. The plot was playful. A black boy dreams of becoming president of the United States. But in the segregated America of the early 1930s, the idea was quietly subversive. For most of the country, it was still unthinkable to imagine a black man in the White House. Yet there was Sammy, beaming with unshakable confidence, delivering his lines with the ease of a seasoned performer. The film set was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Instead of the cramped backstage spaces of vaudeville theaters, here were cavernous sound stages where sunlight was replaced by massive electric lamps. The air smelled faintly of sawdust from freshly built sets. Crews bustled around, adjusting microphones the size of footballs and positioning bulky cameras that looked more like pieces of industrial machinery than tools of art. Sammy absorbed everything: how the director spoke to actors, how the cameraman framed a shot, how the lighting crew transformed a dull backdrop into a magical scene. While other kids his age might have been intimidated, Sammy seemed to grow taller in the spotlight. His energy was so infectious that even hardened crew members found themselves smiling. Though the role was small, it left a mark. Sammy returned to the road with the Will Maston trio, but Hollywood had planted a seed in him. He now understood there was a bigger stage than the ones he'd been dancing on. And while he couldn't have put it into words at the time, he knew that film had the power to reach audiences far beyond the theater walls, to make people who had never met a black child like him see his talent first, before his race. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. By 1943, Sammy Davis Jr. was 18 years old, wiry, quick-footed, and already a seasoned entertainer. But when the U.S. Army drafted him during the height of World War II, none of his years on the stage could prepare him for what waited in uniform. He was assigned to one of the Army's first so-called integrated units, a term that looked good on paper but bore little resemblance to reality. From his first day in basic training, the hostility was immediate. A white soldier he had never met spat a racial slur in his face before he'd even unpacked his gear. The barracks were filled with men who didn't care that Sammy had shared the stage with Hollywood stars. In their eyes, he was just another black recruit who didn't belong. The harassment escalated quickly. He was shoved, mocked, and targeted in ways designed to break his spirit. Some of the abuse was brutal. Once, a group of white soldiers kidnapped him in the middle of the night, stripped him to his waist, and painted his skin white as a twisted joke. On another occasion, he was tricked into drinking beer laced with urine. His nose was broken 3 separate times in fights he hadn't started. Even moments that should have been a relief were twisted into cruelty. When forced to perform for the troops, he'd find slurs scrawled across his forehead before being pushed on stage. The lowest point came one winter night when soldiers tied him to a tree and left him in the freezing cold. His skin burned from the wind, his fingers went numb, and the message was clear. No matter how far he traveled or how well he performed, some people would always try to remind him of his place. It was a near-daily battle to hold on to his sanity. Sammy thought about ending his life more than once during those months. The turning point came when he joined the Army's entertainment unit. On stage, even his worst tormentors couldn't help but applaud. Performing became his weapon, not to make them love him, but to make them see him. It was in those grim barracks and makeshift stages that he learned a truth that would define his career. Talent might not erase hate, but it could command respect, even from those who didn't want to give it. By 1951, Sammy was back in civilian clothes and ready to take over show business. That March, performing with the Will Maston Trio at Ciro's nightclub in Los Angeles, he delivered a show so electric that Hollywood royalty, Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Marilyn Monroe, Judy Garland, sat mesmerized. After that night, Sammy went from unknown to must-see. TV appearances followed. Bookings poured in. In 1954, just 3 years later, tragedy struck again. Driving from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, Sammy was in a head-on collision. The car's horn button smashed into his face, costing him his left eye. But just 8 weeks later, he was back on stage, cracking jokes about it. During his recovery, he studied Judaism, feeling a deep connection to its history of struggle and resilience. He converted, adding Black and Jewish to his identity, a rare and bold combination in 1950s America. In 1957, Sammy met actress Kim Novak. She was one of Hollywood's biggest stars. He was one of its fastest rising. They fell for each other, but interracial romance was taboo. Only 4% of Americans approved of it. When gossip columns falsely claimed they were engaged, the studio panicked. The mob got involved. Sammy was kidnapped and threatened. End it with Kim, or lose your remaining eye. Or worse. Within days, he staged a sham marriage to singer Lori White to throw off the press. The pain of that breakup haunted him. The real evidence, the letters, the photographs, the truth, ended up among the secret contents of that Burbank storage unit. Through the 1960s, Sammy broke barriers. He became the first Black headliner to stay in Las Vegas hotels where he performed. He marched with Martin Luther King Jr. and Selma. He starred in Golden Boy on Broadway, kissing a white actress on stage. A move that brought bomb threats but also history-making applause. He joined the Rat Pack with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, performing in movies like Ocean's 11. But fame came with demons. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, and bad investments drained his fortune. Despite earning an estimated $50 million over his career, Sammy died in 1990, owing the IRS $7 million. His possessions were auctioned. Even his gold records and tap shoes were sold. In 1991, a man named Matthias Horenik got a bill for $365 for a storage unit he'd never rented. His identity had been stolen. When police opened the locker, they found something astonishing. Sammy's missing treasures from the auction. A jukebox loaded with The Candyman, a trumpet, stage costumes, personal documents, and never-before-seen photographs. There were also letters revealing his mother's true identity and private recordings involving Hollywood figures. An employee of Sammy's widow admitted he had hidden the items there to protect them from the IRS. If he had kept paying, the world might never have known. For 30 years, those secrets sat in the dark. Now they tell the story of a man who lived for the spotlight but kept his deepest truths locked away. If you want more untold Hollywood stories, hit like, subscribe, and check the next video for more deep dives into the hidden history behind the biggest names in entertainment.